right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 192 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. My name is Billy Bob. I'm on the West Coast. I have my regular bi-weekly special guest, Christine Lynn. She is a historian, geopolitical analyst, and author, and she's streaming live from Colorado currently. So thank you everyone for joining us. Our title for this morning is The American Century is Over, U.S. at a Crossroads. And it's a very timely title. It's a very good, broad topic. But I would like to open it up just by asking Christine to tell us from her perspective, what do we mean when we talk about the American century? What are we referring to? And is it coming to an end? Has it come to an end?
All right, very well. Good to be with you, Billy Bob. The phrase American century was popularized in the 1940s, very much so by Henry Luce in his publications. And worldwide, it was used and still is used by many to describe the economic, the military, the culture, even the moral influence of the United States upon the entire world. Obviously, the United States became dominant after World War II. The Soviets and the Chinese suffered so many millions of losses, and relatively speaking, the U.S. Was unscathed, but during the war had developed so much in terms of its manufacturing, and it just immediately then in the 40s became dominant in the world, and everyone was recognizing that. You think back, Billy Bob, everyone looked at, the American century. It did, and it was true. It was a fact that the United States was influencing the entire world. Sometimes at the exploitation, of course, as you and I know, of others, and others just by its sheer economic production and its technological advances that it had made. And, when we think about it at that time, everyone looked at the United States and the phrases that we've always heard growing up as the leader of the free world and, the beacon of freedom. What did Reagan call it? The city upon a hill, the land of opportunity. And, I look back, even in the last 10 years, people I've met around the world on different continents still actually have perceived the United States as the land of opportunity. And they are shocked when I, as an American, tell them it is not. Don't expect to come here and have all of this abundance and ability to get a great job and buy a home. Americans understand, no, it's not all that. But for a number of decades, actually, it really got that reputation, and it was a deserved reputation in terms of its influence. But the difference about it is that it used it for evil purposes, the expansion of its empire. And again, the exploitation of others became even greater. So all of those phrases are no more. The world is seeing, and we'll talk about what the United States has just recently done that completely, eliminates those ideas of those phrases. I mean, you think about the American dream. Well, the American dream for most of those of us living here, well, for many of us living here, is to leave this country. And if you're going to stay, the American dream is simply to survive. So powerful empire like the United States is rarely going to recognize that it is declining, that its dominance is fading. But for myself as a historian, I have seen that, to me, the American century has been over for quite some time. But a lot of historians don't look at it that way. They're looking at some of the critical points in our history, but they haven't seen one definitive one. But I will have to tell you at this time, yes, first of all, to me, the American century has been over. But I believe that other historians are going to recognize that the American century is over because of this definitive moment of the United States evil aggression against Iran. And I think that this is later going to be looked at as the moment that the American century ended. Frankly, I also believe that it will be the end of Donald Trump's megalomaniac reign. All of this, I think it's going to look back on as the end of it. Now, for people like yourself and myself that look at everything dialectically, we've already known that the American century is over. We can see that gradual, we can see the internal contradictions. But for most Americans and for the rest of the world, I believe this moment and the mass murders that Trump is responsible for, that the United States is responsible for, when we think about all those precious children, the little girls, 6 to 12, what, 160 death count now, the hundreds more being murdered, the fine city of Tehran being destroyed, Lebanon, the suburbs, southern suburbs of Lebanon being destroyed like it is. And again, all of this is Trump, and all of this is the United States. This is never again, I believe, in the world that the United States is going to be immolated, admired, trusted. I mean, there is no credibility in anything that the United States says. And it's not just a political party or this crazy man they have as president. The United States is going to be held responsible. No longer are any countries, whatever semblance of credibility or trust that they could have in the United States, has been completely eliminated. So I would say that the global dominance has ended. And of course, as it is ending, the empire is ending. It makes it very dangerous. But I don't think that ever that the United States as a country will be able to mitigate the mass murder, the blood that is on the American government and Trump's hands ever again. So yeah, I've long thought that the American century is over, but I believe that historians are going to look back and say this is the moment when it was completely eliminated. The dominance was gradually being lost, but now there's no credibility for this country. We're going to have nuclear proliferation, most likely. Look at other countries. They know that is the only way to survive economically. And in our country, when we look at it dialectically, you and I have already seen, and we can understand, the contradictions that are going and have been identifying it for some time. But now other Americans are going to start feeling that the risk of terrorism is going to increase. Countries, Trump claimed, and just talking about this evil aggression against Iran, that it is about nuclear proliferation. Now every country in the world knows, even Europe, is taking a look at its relationship with the United States. So in terms of its dominance, it's losing even its quote allies. And even the Gulf states are probably going to be seeing if there's any legal way that they can get out of the agreements to have U.S. bases in their countries. So when you think about what the American century meant, economical, military, cultural, morally, the United States has lost all of that. And I don't believe it will ever be restored. There's no way that it can be regained now. And it's a very dangerous time because the empire is realizing itself, though it doesn't want to admit it at this time, that it is not only fading, it is being many times over ended at this time. War, debt, crisis, it's on the road straight to hell. That's where it belongs.
What historic precedents can you relate to what's going on now? Is there anything any similar occurrence that we can use to better understand what's going on now?
Yeah. Well, up until, let's say, because it's so interesting to focus upon the attack on Iran, but up until that, as you and I have discussed before, we could see that the empire, we'll say, is contracting. We have long identified the imperial overstretch, exceeding its economic capacity. What is it? I guess $34 trillion in debt. So we take a look back in history, and the expansion to 800 to 1,000 military bases. So what does that? That is, it can remind you of Britain. Britain, England as a country, the UK did not vanish. But what did it do? It lost its dominance gradually and just kind of became a middle tier type of power, for the same reasons, really. Rome transitioned into the Byzantine Empire. Again, they didn't collapse, but they had that internal political instability. They had the external because of their military spending. And I would just say that the internal fractures, the infighting potential for certainly civil strife, civil war in the United States. When I take a look at what happened with Britain and the Roman Empire, it's very, very similar. And what the biggest thing that is similar is neither one, the empires themselves, would acknowledge the fact that they were losing their dominance, even though it was happening over a number of years. They didn't acknowledge it, but then others could see it. At least some others could see it. So I would say, historically, we've seen that. The countries don't disappear, but their ability and their dominance to, in this case, impose sanctions and threaten other countries with impunity, attack countries with impunity, the expansion of the empire, which we see what Trump is so focused upon, with Venezuela and Cuba and what he's doing in the Middle East and Greenland, Canada, all of this utter nonsense, that is too much expansion, and it is going to come back. And he and this country is going to reap what it has sown. So I see that the arrogance of this imperialistic country, the poetic justice is, it's not just going to be its lack of dominance worldwide, which it has lost. It has lost. But it's going to be within the country itself. And Americans are waking up. I do believe that, Billy Bob.
I would say, in a way, Trump is a symptom, of this declining empire that doesn't realize it's in decline. And so he has all the hubris, of a fully formed, very powerful empire, but without the power, And so, and we're going to be seeing that more and more. And he's just really, accelerating the effort to maintain what is being lost. And he's just really like putting the pedal to the metal to make everybody see that, we're not in decline, that we're still the greatest hegemon on the planet. And that's just causing it to, decline faster. But what are the global forces that are shaping, or that are, forcing the empire to retract? So like, what about China, Russia, and other potential poles of power on the planet?
Sure. And to what you were just saying, the lies to hold on to the hegemony, as I said, they rarely are going to recognize it. I mean, they truly might not recognize it. They start feeling it, and that's what makes them so dangerous and erratic and reckless. But it just brings a lot of thoughts what you said. But the lies are his last effort, and of course, I know our audience, as I've said before, is far more, has awareness and intelligence and critical thinking than most Americans. But but we can have Americans just discovering and watching this show. The fact is, to them, I have to say, what you are seeing on your news, your Western, your United States news, is a fraction and distorted truth in regards to the military aggression, the war against Iran. You will hear about, quote, all of their successes. You will not hear about the massive destruction of the United States bases in all of those countries and how they had to evacuate, about 54,000 before this even began, to make those bases relatively uninhabited, because they, to be sure there wasn't mass American life. Well, Americans' lives, whatever, they're acknowledging, they're saying 6 at this time. I believe it is going to be far greater, but there's much more destruction going on. And every one of us who actually does love freedom and sovereignty and the right of a people to have their culture and their traditions, and not to be dominated by the United States, should admire Iran completely. And you recently, Billy Bob, on yours, and a few people have shared it, have put that beautiful meme with the Iranian flag, "I stand with Iran." And anyone who actually believes in those attributes that they attributed to the United States of freedom and light and goodness and all, well, if you actually have that inside of your heart, you would be standing with Iran, not the evil United States and what it's doing. To stand by your country when it is completely wrong, then you are aligning with all of the murders and the mass murders. And anyway, I really liked where you shared that. And everyone should be speaking out, doing whatever you can. For some of us, it is simply sharing that truth. In terms of the powers, I would, to your question, Russia and China. Yeah, they, two things I don't want to forget. In reference to the attack on Iran, what I found very interesting, and it is because both Russia and China operate differently in this world. They are the countries that the rest of the world is looking toward. We now have both a military alternative in terms of alliances, agreements that can be made with two very powerful nuclear countries in Russia and China. And both of these countries are actually forming, in terms of BRICS, the economic, the respect for other sovereign nations. The world is seeing there's an alternative, and they won't end. The US dollar, that is why, it is diminishing. And I predict and I'm very glad to see that, the de-dollarization, as more countries leave the dollar in terms of doing trade with China and doing trade with Russia. But they operate differently in that they maintain a strong state direction or authority over the strategic sectors. And that is a continuity that the United States government lacks. And it gives Russia and China that strength. And because they are countries that believe in the respect for other nations and their sovereignty, they are going to have the partnerships as the U.S. loses them. I mean, like I said, even the Gulf states are maybe looking for legal ways to end all the contracts, for example, that Trump bragged about, because nobody wants to be affiliated and have U.S. bases. Again, total end of the American century and dominance. But Russia and China are standing as the examples, and as people, countries ally with them. And you often say, Billy Bob, China, Russia, they don't want to see the U.S. collapse. You frequently have said that, and I would agree with you. What they would most like for the stability in the world, which we don't have any right now because of the United States, is to see the United States restrained. They know how dangerous a collapsing superpower is, and we see that right now. But they don't want that nuclear instability. And I made reference to it. These countries with the U.S. bases are actually on the phone with Putin, several of them, 3 or 4, begging Putin to intervene to ask Iran not to be bombing their countries. Yet they are the ones who decided to have United States bases from which they go and with their air power and murder people. So yeah, they're getting the consequences, but the world is learning. But Russia and China didn't do this. Russia and China are on the sidelines. Everyone knows that they are the ones. Any mediation that ever takes place in the world, it is going to be with their assistance. And they're seeing, and for me, I take a look at Russia in particular, and I know your expertise is in China and mine in Russia. To me, Russia is the hope of the world. When I see what it is offering to those in the global South, everybody is recognizing there is a different way. There is a better way, because they are advocating multipolar partnerships. So as much as Russia and China, they're not doing anything in particular. That's not their goal. Their goal is to focus upon their countries. But as a result, because the United States doesn't think about, quote, America first at all, it really never has. they may have to see that it is going to collapse in terms of as a government and as a financial and military power. But right, best they would like to see that, we all know it's unsustainable. It's a matter of the United States. How quickly does it want to fold, or does it want to start making some other choices, which Russia and China have always welcomed? You think about their diplomacy, always willing to talk. They're not going to trust this evil government, but they'll talk to see if they're at all coming to their senses. There's one other thing about Russia and China that to me makes them very different, not only in terms of their control of the most important sectors in their country, which make them thrive, unlike the United States, that centralized political authority. But also there's a very difference in the people. There's a very much difference, and thus the government. They suffered incredibly in World War II. When you take a look at the tens of millions of loss and that historical memory, the suffering I think of in the Soviet Union and the transformation, into the Russian Federation, that the people went through, the deprivation, most of that inflicted by the United States and the CIA at the time to infiltrate Russia, which they did quite effectively. And fortunately for everyone in the world, and certainly for Russians, Putin put an end to that. But through all this suffering that the Chinese and the Russian people had, I would say they developed a very strong, which is compatible with both of the countries' spiritual beliefs, a humanity. Their people can endure much, but they also have a strength in them that is lacking, I feel, in the majority of the American people. They developed humanity from all of this. And the Americans, because of the American century, because of all of that prosperity, developed consumerism and greed. And they want to hold on to that. And that's why you see the desperation. But yeah, Russia and China are what everyone is looking to in the world. The majority of the world are with Russia and China. And only a small fraction in very tiny countries that are just vassals of the United States are with the U.S. Its dominance in every area, including diplomatically, has ended.
Yeah, I like to, kind of describe what's going on with, Xi in China and Putin in Russia. They're trying to manage the decline of Western imperialism in a way that does not, result in a nuclear war, World War III, or a huge economic catastrophe for the planet. But they don't have the control, right? They're not capable of deciding this. The West has to decide the nature of its own decline. And so they're talking and trying to work with us and trying to, make it as least violent and least, least explosive as possible. But, the West, of course, has its own agenda, right? The West still thinks it can maintain its global hegemony. And it sees that, to do that, it has to destroy Russia, destroy China. And definitely to do that, they have to drive a wedge, between Russia and China. And fortunately, the leadership that's currently in Russia, currently in China, understands that very clearly. And, they're not about to allow the West to do that. I mean, it's not that long ago that we did experience the Sino-Soviet split, which was, a disaster for the Soviet Union and for humanity, really, that, the West was able to split apart, these two countries. And so I think the current leadership definitely sees that clearly. There's always a risk of what comes after. And, both men are, in their getting old. Both leaders are getting old. But again, it's not about people, right? It's not about men. There's systems, there's governments, there's adults in the room. And so I'm very optimistic that at some point, the West is going to break its back on, Russia first, right? With the SMO, and now Iran. And who knows where else they're going to go? Are they going to launch a war against Cuba?
Yeah.
are they going to try and do an embargo against China and really go for broke with China? So I mean, this is the hubristic thinking, and this is the strategy that they've documented in all of the think tank literature about how to maintain, Western imperialism throughout the rest of the 21st century. And but like you said at the very beginning, we really need to appreciate the sacrifice of the Russian people with the special military operation, taking that risk. And, they've lost thousands of lives, to resist, the efforts of the West to maintain their hegemony. And then right now, currently, the Iranian people, they really deserve our support and our thanks for what they are doing, for standing strong, and for investing over decades into this very moment right now, where they are just being attacked, and the West is just trying to utterly destroy them. So it's these countries, and it's the North Korean people who and the people of Cuba, for generations, ever since the early 50s, have been sacrificing, on behalf of humanity in resistance to this evil empire. And what we see in these Epstein files, and we haven't talked about them a lot because of the Iran war, but it just reveals the nature. It reveals the corrupt nature and the heart of the Western imperialist elite, who have these grandiose plans of maintaining their own power, privilege, and wealth throughout the rest of the 21st century. So they're going to lose. Humanity is not going to put up with their nonsense for too much longer, and we're seeing it playing out right now. But so I had a third question here. So what are the major challenges that humanity or the U.S. is facing economically, geopolitically, and really psychologically? What are the major challenges that we're going to see appear, and that are going to be addressed by all parties?
Right. And we've touched upon some of the actual challenges for the people, the threat of more terrorism, the rising prices, as I said, just to survive in this country for many people. But I would answer that question that the greatest challenge is for every single American and who they are, their heart. Marx said that a country goes through many years of struggle before the people themselves, not just the institution of the government, but the people themselves, to make them capable of wielding political power. And we're talking about wielding political power well, with justice. And I believe that he said something like it can be 15, 20, even 50 years of not only international conflicts, but civil wars before a people are going to be able to govern themselves. So I would say that the biggest challenge and obstacle to making a different choice is within the people themselves. Psychologically, you mentioned, emotionally, and I would also add spiritually. The American people as a whole, with a few exceptions, their psyche is set in this pride and arrogance and American exceptionalism. And it's really going to be the people, I believe, even more so than those that are in power right now, that ultimately, as Mark said, what's going to happen in this country. How do you want the rest of the world to view you? What type of governance do you want? But most Americans actually believe themselves to be somehow, I don't know how they would think this, morally superior to the rest of the world. And you think about the irony of that. Instead, The world is seeing their weakness, as you and I have looked at. Trump is a very weak man, just a gigantic ego, which is demonic. But it reflects the United States, and many of the people are just
He is a perfect reflection of our culture.
Yes, it sure is, Billy Bob. So I think that the greatest challenge is within the individual, because all of us as Americans then can determine the course. As we said, everyone at the beginning, American century is over. Yes. So now we're at that crossroads. Which way we're going to go? You don't look toward the government, quote, representatives. You look to yourself and say, which way do I want this country to go? Do I want to keep waving that flag, or do I want to question everything that this country has done practically since its inception? I don't think there's really ever been much of any time at all that it wasn't focused on expansion and military interventions worldwide, nothing to do with its own borders. So they have the big choice to survive this. And, as you said earlier about what Russia and China, don't want to see that total collapse. What they want to see and what's going to happen is really up to the American people. Do we transition from an empire to a republic, which we are supposed to be, but really have not operated at all as, or are we just going to be utterly and literally destroyed, whether that's simply from the internal and the civil conflicts, or ultimately the war that, as you very well said, articulately said, Russia and China want to do their best to not have be inflicted upon this world. But in terms of now, I look at it, the United States, its weakness has been exposed, but that greatest challenge is within the people spiritually. Do you care what's right? Do you care what's wrong? And right now, still, many Americans, even if they oppose, for example, something like the attack on Iran, they still cling to their American flag and love their country. What are you loving? What are you loving? Love your family, love your friends. But this country, what it stands for in the entire world now, is the most evil, rogue, most dangerous rogue country in the world. And everyone's recognizing it. And I would say everyone except Americans. And that's going to change. And then they're going to make their choice. Right now, I'm just going to share my personal opinion, apart from just the facts of what we see. And you are more optimistic individual than I am, Billy Bob. But I do not feel that this evil empire of the United States is going to recognize, and even if it's not for the cause of right and wrong, but just for their own survival, choose differently. Anyone can choose again, an individual, a country. I don't believe that the United States is going to do that. I believe that there is going to be tremendous suffering in this country. And then I still see it as just that that ending of what we call the United States and its government. I just think it's going to happen. How? Well, one can speculate, but I do not believe that they're going to make at this crossroads the choice that Russia openly and China openly is giving to them, to choose differently and to join the majority of the world, in respect and a multipolar, President Putin, even as far back as 2007 at the Munich conference, the famous speech at the Munich Security Conference, on which really shocked those Americans sitting in the front seat, that evil John McCain. I remember it well, everything that Putin so well articulated. But even in that speech, he also focused upon the need for that multipolar world. And along with quite a few other very important points that he made to them after he had seen how evil and betraying that they are to Russia, to the Russian Federation at the time. But he focused on the need for that. The United States has been told this, warned this, but again, just like Trump himself, I'm sure there isn't anybody that can tell him something that he can stop and think, I'm going to reconsider what I'm doing. But the country operates the same way. I don't think that it is going to take the crossroads that Russia and China and the rest of the world would like to see it take. So I do think that the violence is only going to increase. And it's just a matter of individuals deciding what is right for them in this country. Do you want to stay and one day rebuild it? Or do you wish to go elsewhere in the world where you can have a much better life for your family? But I don't think they're going to change. I don't think they're going to ever admit they're wrong. They don't even have to admit they're wrong. They just need to change their behavior. In some ways, they will be forced to do that. Yes, but nobody's ever going to trust them again. They're never actually going to be a part of it, because I don't feel that they're going to fundamentally, spiritually change.
Yeah, when we look at what happened with Britain after World War II, I mean, they're still ruled by the same, corrupt oligarchs that existed, that were the world power, for 100 years or more. But they did, their global power did erode considerably. And so that's what we can hope for.
Right.
The American people have been really, they've been allowed to not know what's going on. Like, they've had the luxury of not having any ideological or political understanding, and they've been supported in this, and they've been encouraged to be this way, by the ruling class, because the ruling class does not want an informed citizenry that understands what's going on and that's going to hold them accountable and keep them in check. And so, the vast majority of the American people, have just embraced this luxury of being completely detached from objective reality, completely detached about what the United States is and what it's doing. And so, when we talk about what comes after, it's there's a lot of room for pessimism, because the American people just don't understand. And so while they see things collapsing around them, they're not going to get it. So I like to, I'm always trying to educate and put forth this framework of, what needs to happen is that we need to replace the ownership of the state by the, oligarch Epstein class, and replace it with a political party that, truly represents and is interested in pursuing the interests of the working class majority. So that, I think, is the main distinction. And that's, that's my preferred framework for trying to educate people and to help them understand what is going on, what happened in the past. And based on this is what we need to do going forward. This is the ideology. It's like a roadmap for progress. And so, but yeah, I mean, most people reject this framework. Most people reject this as communism and socialism and Marxism. And we all know that just kills tens of millions of people and ends up in gulags and poverty. And, and so, no, that's not right. They tell us. Right. So it's a lot of de-indoctrination to do. And it's not an easy task, because of the generational pro-Western, pro-capitalist, pro-oligarch indoctrination that they've just been getting for generations. And so, so ideally, what's going to happen is the American people are going to wake up. They're going to realize what's going on. They're going to demand accountability. They're going to put forth a political party, based on a political platform that will do exactly what needs to happen. Work with the other major powers and peace and through mutual prosperity. And have a new golden age for humanity and the planet. Like right. That's what needs to happen, Christine.
Right. And it's a beautiful dream, but I don't think that will ever come to pass, at least not in any time frame that I can consider. You made multiple good points, and you and I both know, as soon as you begin to at all speak about class, I have found that the American people at this point reject the whole use of the word. They have absolutely no comprehension. They're not going to think of themselves. I mean, we used to think of, the lower class, middle class, upper class. People don't even do that. So they're not using the word, because those have all been erased. Now it's just the top oligarchs, the top class, and the rest of us, with variations, of course. I mean, obviously, but people do not even even grasp that at all. And as soon as you begin to talk about it, like you said, they just say, oh, you're a communist, and dismiss. You know, you might be saying exactly what's true that's happening in the United States, but as soon as you start to identify it at all, they dismiss it. So yeah, beautiful dream that you have there. I would like to see that happen, of course. Russia and China, the entire world would like to see some sanity in the United States. But I don't think you're going to see that until there has been far more violence on the mainland, one way or another, or suffering as a result of their evil escapades around the world. Did someone have a question?
Well, no, I like Dust's comments. Long live the great legacy of Stalin and the Soviet Union. Communists who followed their example did the most good and one of the best victories we have won here, from labor to civil rights. And obviously, I mean, to include, geopolitics and just creating a polar power, that forced all these concessions from the oligarchs, in their ideological competition with socialism. But yeah.
Great comment from him. Absolutely. And I actually see other countries, certainly, I mean, the United States is far from it, like we've discussed already. But I'd like to see all countries learn from what Stalin accomplished in the Soviet Union prior to the war and thereafter the war. Remarkable achievements. And yes, we're in a different time. Everything I always focus upon, we're evolving. Our leaders are evolving. Well, not in the United States, but in other countries. Their countries, not this one, is evolving. Our country, the United States, is devolving. That's how I would say it. But in other countries, yes, they are evolving, and there would be so much to be learned from the strength that Stalin gave to the country. I feel that strength is still inherent in the country today, and gave it the basis to survive all of the suffering of the 90s until we got a wise man who did love the people and the country, and rescued it from the United States goals at the time, to which you alluded. And those goals that you alluded to, and all of their think tanks about the strategic defeat of Russia, and of course they're going to be targeting China and Russia in this, they have never renounced. And I don't feel any optimism or hope about the United States as long as they don't renounce it. Because even a change of behavior that these countries can try to negotiate with, and from their sense of strength and non-trust of them, but nevertheless to do, at any moment that the United States can completely defy and break any contract. Yeah. I mean, we see they're in, again, with Iran. I mean, Iran has had this happen to them multiple times. But others as well. You in negotiation, and they go kill your religious leader, the leader that everybody loves. The United States will never be trusted again. That's why when we say the American century, it's over. It's not going to be restored. And I just don't see that change that you talk about. I don't. They would have to renounce their goals. And I just think that it's going to become impossible for them to pursue those goals, and they are going to get weakened, and everyone's going to know it, and they can go rah and describe their country as the greatest on earth, but that will be the biggest joke that there is in the world going.
And part of the reason the oligarchy is not going to give up and will continue to pursue in futility, its global domination, is because as a class, the people that are making the decisions will never be held accountable, and they are not going to be the ones sacrificing. They have the ability to make everyone else sacrifice, for their own interests. And so, they're going to be safe in their gated communities. They can already afford, all the groceries they want, all the healthcare they need, the finest education, and so they're pursuing these policies from a position of extreme privilege. And they recognize that, if they aren't aggressive like they're doing, they will lose their privilege. Mm-hmm. And so they'd much rather just continue from a place of privilege, fighting this futile fight and making everyone else suffer. They're burning it all down around them, because they can't rule it. And so, yeah, I mean, we will see how far they're willing to go. Like, I hope, we don't have I mean, a lot of people are saying we're already in World War III, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is covering many regions of the world. I mean, of course, there's a lot of room for acceleration, and there's a lot of room for more conflict, but it's definitely could be considered a world war right now. And can we keep it from going nuclear? Like, is the United States going to use nuclear weapons against Iran in 3 months because they just can't stop them from firing missiles?
Right.
I don't put it past them at all.
No, not at all. 2 points that I'd like to comment. When you talked about, and that's what we need to emphasize. And you're right in terms of that class. In this situation, they are protected. And you said, that they are going to, hold on to their life of luxury. They'll send people to die. Trump will send Americans who signed up for this military to do his orders and murder people for their paycheck. That's what they're doing, because this is unjust. And what we got, it shows what a failed country this is. Their representatives, their Congress, their Senate, they don't even stop it. The whole world sees that the United States, this is truly what represents it. But you said that, they're going to, protect their privilege, I believe that you said. But I would say even more, kind of like Zelensky in Ukraine, he needs to hold on to all this, because not only might he lose his privilege, he might lose his life. And I would say, in the ultimate sense, we take a look at the Nuremberg trials that were held, and the corresponding sentences, along with the executions of some of them. What would justice be? What would justice be? Will we ever have a world where we could have a Nuremberg trials for the mass murderers of the West? And I'm just saying, I don't believe that is going to happen. Okay, that would be another dream, like your dream of things being well. That would also be a dream for justice. But I don't believe that we're going to see that whatsoever. But that would be, a justice. But we're not going to see that. They're not going to be held to account. But whether they can protect their life of privilege, frankly, I think that might ultimately, at least I hope, be in question itself. To your point about World War III and some people feeling it, it's already, well, of course, technically this isn't, the World War III, but I am of the camp that feels that this is part of World War III. I believe that, and it's just, my belief looking at it, that those points, point by point of escalation, like dominoes, has already been started. Of course, nobody who is sane wants to see that ultimate, but it appears that with the kind of people that the West is, that is going to happen. And of course, in the Bible and in really some amazing prophets throughout the ages, so much of what is occurring right now has been prophesied. And regardless of how much Russia and China and sane people want to keep that from happening, it looks inevitable to me. And so I would actually say, of course, technically it's not World War III, but I believe that it has already begun. I mean, when I look at World War II, it was the same way. You can point to one or two specifics, the start of World War II, but really it started before, and you could see all of that happening in the society. So yeah, it's kind of like the decline of America and the end of the American century that we began with. The empire is the last to recognize it. People are not recognizing it. But yeah, this is World War III isn't just going to be a moment. Just like this attack on Iran is a moment I think historians will look back on. But it was already occurring. I think the same thing with World War III. And I do feel that it is an inevitable, though tragic for human life on Earth, domino effect that we are well on the way of.
Yeah, and reading their strategic literature, reading their plan, what I consider a futile plan. Iran is just the first stepping stone, right? I mean, again, Russia and then China, of course, is the real target. All the literature talks about how China is the peer economic rival that must be, contained, which is just a euphemism for destroyed. And, you're not going to do that if they have a strong relationship with a strong Russia. And then Iran, of course, was the third part of, the major powers that are resisting Western imperialism. So it's like a stepping stone. And I mean, we're seeing how it goes with Iran, and, it's unknown, how that plays out. But I mean, I expect it's not going to go too well for the West, but they're going to, are they just going to give up because they don't, it doesn't work out perfectly with Iran, or are they going to, retool their strategy and just continue this press? I think it's obvious that, they're not anywhere near giving up. And so, yeah, we have a long few years of watching them, lash out and just engage in all these entirely criminal things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, criminal things. I mean, illegal in every measure of it. Certainly violation of international law. That's why I make reference to the time when the world came together with the Nuremberg trials. Will we ever care about justice as a global entity again, to say no more? I mean, will these people ever be held accountable in some way, whatever way that would be? But I don't see that. The division is too great. There is truly good and evil. It's the spiritual war playing out before us in our individual lives, on the political stage, and the geopolitical. Will we ever see justice like that again? Because right now, with impunity, people like Trump and Netanyahu mass murder, and people still give them respect. People shake their hands like they're a leader. Neither one is a leader. They're just a demonic human being, human demon, I call them. But will there ever be justice? Because for the world that you envision, that dream of them choosing differently, and anyone can choose differently. I know that. That's within the realm of possibility, no matter how remote. They would have to renounce the evil that they have done, and there would have to be justice. And I just don't see the United States ever having the humility to say we were wrong. And even those leaders that we had, even if they're not in power now, but, in whatever sense of justice is deemed by the world for what they are, the mass murderers, the crimes against humanity that they are responsible for. And even if they just simply lose their influence, I don't see the United States as a whole, as the people, having the humility to ever say that they were wrong. I just don't. The majority of them, even if they are battered down and suffer as they might, as a result of the course that the United States has put itself on, I still don't see them getting that humility to say we were wrong. They might regret it, but they won't feel that they were wrong. They always seem to feel justified because, after all, they're an American, and that's why they're hated. Not every American. They don't hate Americans for being an American. They hate this country and anyone that would identify with it, and rightly so. You said very beautifully, Billy Bob, about every one of us, you and I both, but you very much expounded upon it, should be standing with Iran. For those of you with a faith, whatever, I mean, it's a mystery when we see all the suffering and the death that this country is inflicting. And don't blame this Zionist state, blame the United States, because without the United States, I don't believe any of this would be happening. But anyway, it's going to lose its dominance. I just think that it is going to wreak much more havoc. Before we came on the air, Billy Bob, today, Trump, I believe, was talking today, and I don't remember the exact phrase, but he actually again alluded to the change of the government in Cuba, as if it was, I think he said it in some affirmative way, like it's going to happen. So again, no, until they completely lose, and of course they're very powerfully militarily, but nevertheless, their people are going to suffer. The people are going to die in the military for what? For nothing. as they have before in their Middle East wars. So many died for nothing. They're going to die for nothing again. And meanwhile, the people here on the mainland are going to begin suffering. But even that, I don't think anyone wants to admit. The United States has been wrong for decades. And that's what it would take to truly change.
Yeah, justice. Yeah. I mean, we, you know, as human beings, like we just long for justice, and it's real, you know, not fun to think about how, you know, unlikely it ever we'll ever get to see it. Um, but you know, we can dream about it. We can you know, make ourselves happy thinking about if only you know, our government would get justice.
Yeah.
A lot of the societies are being harmed right now, you know, with this conflict with Iran. You know, they're just really dependent on energy
Yeah.
from the Middle East, and right now they're already suffering. And so, you know, I think Iran has a good strategy of you know, bringing pain and making it difficult for the United States to continue their murderous, you know, criminality against their country. And so, you know, we're gonna watch it play out. I mean, it's tough to be optimistic, but I can't help I can't help but think about, you know, how on earth is the United States and their Western allies going to be able to continue this without taking a big L, and
Yes.
just, you know, quicker rather than later,
Yeah.
just give up the whole freaking impossible task of, you know, global domination. Just, you know, knock it off, you know.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
um
The
but
consequences, I
yeah,
really will say, you know, you and I both share anyone who is righteous, just the injustice of all the death that the United States is bringing now and has been bringing for decades. You know, really, when you calculate as a historian, when I've taken a look at it, in the millions that people are dead that should be alive because of the United States. And we're just seeing it blatantly right now before us. And it's just a big mystery. And as a Christian, I'll say it's just a mystery, and to see the suffering that is occurring. It's so evil. But I'll just say that in my faith, I believe that the consequences and the spiritual consequences, which will be real world practical consequences, are coming to the American people. And I believe that that is what is going to put a stop to them. It is their own hubris, as you said, their own arrogance, and the government that they allow this to be happening. Your representatives allowing it to be happening. They're not even restraining Trump and his war powers. This is,
yeah,
I just ultimately feel that it doesn't help, you know, with your mental need, your emotional need, and your just righteous indignation to see
yeah.
the suffering and the death that this country's doing. But nevertheless, I do feel that we will see those consequences one day, Billy Bob, and every one of these people committing these murders. And this is just a matter of faith, I believe that it's just, I have a need right now as a human being on this earth to see justice now against them. We all do. But ultimately, that's the mystery of all of this happening. But they will face justice, I believe, here on this earth in one way. Certainly the United States will, and hopefully the Zionist state will. I think many of us would like to see that, and stand with all those who have the courage to fight, because they are the ones, not the U.S. military. The Iranians are the ones. Those in Lebanon, the different groups, all of them, they're fighting for freedom. The United States almost has never done that. Almost never in its all existence has it fought for freedom. It only fights for money. And right now, the quote defense, the offense, I call it, you know, offense, the war machine, and their corporations are the ones making the money off your dead bodies and off of your family's suffering in this country. So no, I have no optimism, and but I do think the justice will be had. It's just, you know, as a human being, you want to see it. You just hope that you get to see it.
It's interesting that they changed their name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. I mean, at least that's a little glimmer of honesty. But you know, it's for cynical purposes of cynical manipulation. Let me just point out what the opposition, I mean, the supposed Democratic opposition, I learned that they were doing this morning. I guess they dusted off the Russiagate hoax.
Oh, yeah.
And the Russiagate hoax is back, and they're tying it to Epstein. And this is the opposition that they offer, I mean, because they're not an opposition, right? I mean, the Democrats and the Republicans are one party, and they belong to the party of oligarchs, and they serve the oligarchs, and they serve Western imperialism, but they have to pretend to be an opposition. So it's like they think of scripts to write. They think of narratives. How can we sell this fake idea that we're in opposition to Trump and all that he's doing, but without actually opposing it? And so they've come up with this idea that they're going to, impeach Trump and accuse him of being Putin's puppet, and that how the Mueller investigation was actually correct. Like that's what there was a 45-minute speech on the Senate floor arguing this. And now they're going to tie it with Epstein. And this is their big, hyper partisan attack. It is just a bankrupt idea that it's any kind of political opposition. Like like a true opposition, Christine, is us. We're the actual political opposition to Trump, and we're not represented anywhere. Nobody in government, because they're all vetted by money. There's a process where you don't get into positions of power unless, you learn the game, and you learn to play this partisan bullshit ball, this game, this partisan game. So, we represent legitimate political opposition. We represent an alternative ideology and an alternative system to the corrupt oligarchy that, only pretends to be, divided against itself, but it's not. So, I wanted to point on that. And then I want to ask you about where people can see your work. I know you've got a new website.
Sure. Thank you. But first, to what you just said, when you said, both sides bankrupt and the only opposition is us, and we are growing because we are sharing the truth and trying to make them see. We do think logically and dialectically. We do see what's going on, and more people right now in the United States than ever before. Even I remember during the Iraq War and speaking at a few places and dealing with this even then. But more now are feeling it because of the things you said earlier, because of the lack of medical and health care, because of the cost to feed their family. People are being, where they cannot even afford all the bills, just the necessities of life. And that makes them able, I think, to listen to us. And we are growing. And I think the numbers also show that, and I think that even some of the reactions, forget the crazy ones that you and I always hear from. Okay. But there are those people who are just starting. You're getting that seed. And even as unpleasant as it is for them to recognize, they're seeing that both of those parties are, as you said, bankrupt. They are void of anything of humanity. All right. But still, American people worldwide all want the same thing. They all just want to live. They want to have their children. They want to have their life. And as Americans are seeking for that answer, it's up to people like us, our listeners. Take what you learn from myself, from Billy Bob, from all of your reading, from others like us, and you become somebody. You might not have a podcast, but you have your family, you have your neighbors, you have at your place of work. You got to have the courage, because other people are dying in the world for their freedom and for their sovereignty. And the most you got to do is go and pay a few more dollars for your gas that you're going to complain about. Get out of all the bitching about gas and prices and all, and focus on what really matters. This is a morally bankrupt country, and neither a Republican or Democrat is going to solve that. And yes, as you said, there is an alternative way of thinking. And as I said earlier about Marx, it can turn into years of civil strife as well. And that is where the more and the numbers of us, there might even be hope in this country for us to come together and form something quite promising and beautiful. Thank you for asking about my new website. I invite everyone to it. It is historianoftruth.com. I have a lot of thoughts and essays up there. And I invite everyone to historianoftruth.com. And if you ever want to be in touch with me, you can email me through the website. Very sad conversation, sobering conversation we've had today, but very necessary. I ask everyone who learned something today, or it activates what you recognize as the truth in you, go share what you learned, go share your perceptions with everyone else. It's critical.
I'm struggling between wrapping up or making one more point.
Make a point.
Okay. I touched on it earlier about people having this luxury of not having to be informed. But I honestly think that, when we think about what the future ought to hold for us, it's kind of, people have a moral responsibility to understand what is going on and what their government is doing. And so people have been encouraged to behave immorally by totally dropping out and not having any clue what's going on, and just, having the privilege, really the luxury, the decadent luxury of just, existing in their own little bubble, their own little social cliques, their own little very small world, completely unattached to objective reality. But going forward, like you mentioned that Marx quote, it's our moral responsibility to know what's going on and to, put pressure and, educate those around us, put pressure on our government, and, keep our government accountable to us. It's an informed citizenry, like, our founding fathers talked about. Not that I want to put our founding fathers on a pedestal. I certainly don't. But they did say that was correct, what they said about, we have to have an informed citizenry. It's without that, that is when our government, gets taken over by other interests and just runs amok. So I apologize for bringing that up.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good. Very, very, very well said, because and there's no reason not to be informed. There's no reason. And I think that the more their bubbles pop, they might seek out learning. It was there all along, but maybe more are going to be seeking now.
We'll never be able to have a rational society, free, moral society, until that happens. And so we might as well just the sooner the better for that. So Dust, thank you for putting her website up here in the comment, and we will reconvene. So me and Christine meet bi-weekly. So not next Friday, but the Friday after that, God willing. I think we missed one because some technical issues, but thank you so much for joining me today, Christine, and we'll see you in about 2 weeks.
You bet. Be well.
Okay, bye.